Jackson Jack's, Miller's log cabin clung precariously to the Oregon coastal cliff, where the Pacific waves roared, crashing against the rugged base rock with a sound like the rhythmic hammer of doom. Tonight, the storm arrived. The winter tempest carried a bone-chilling cold from the north, turning the surrounding pine forest into a battlefield of wind and snow. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of smoldering pine and acrid alcohol. Jack sat motionless in a worn, leather armchair, his bloodshot eyes fixed on an empty space. On the thick oak table before him lay three objects, defining his entire existence of the moment. A bottle of bourbon, two-thirds empty, a photo frame placed face down, and a pitch-black Sig Sauer P226, round-chambered safety off. It had been 3 years. 3 years since Sarah, his wife, had taken her last breath in a stark white hospital room, battling a malignant tumor alone while he was busy commanding a meaningless raid in faraway Afghanistan. When Jax returned, all that remained was a freshly dug grave and the mysterious disappearance of the 2 other family members, Baron and Duke, the 2 professional-line German shepherds. The children, Sarah had devoted herself to training, vanished right after her funeral. No trace, no clue, as if they had followed her to the afterlife. Jax raised his glass, the amber liquid, swirling. He drank, not for pleasure, but to drown the screams in his head. The former SEAL Team 6 commander, the war machine the Pentagon once prided itself on, was now an empty shell, rotting from the inside. Crash! A large pine branch snapped, hitting the roof violently. The cabin shook. Jax didn't flinch. He was accustomed to the sound. But the next moment, another sound cut through, smaller, sharper, and 1,000 times more dangerous than nature's roar. Beep. The sound came from the old security panel mounted on the wall, where Jax had taped over the indicator light, leaving only the small speaker exposed. Jax set the glass down, silently. Pressure sensor number 4, 50 meters north of the house. Forest edge. His muscles tensed, the soldier's reflex cutting through the alcoholic haze. Wild animal? No. A deer or bear would trigger the sensors randomly and repeatedly. But this beep was singular, decisive. Jack stood up. The armchair didn't creak. He knew how to shift, his weight to move in silence. His hands swept across the tabletop, rough, calloused fingers gripping the cold grip of the Sig Sauer. He moved toward the window, pressing himself into the corner, a blind spot from any external view. He didn't turn on the lights. Darkness was his old ally. Jax used the gun muzzle to gently separate a small gap in the thick curtains. Outside, the world was a chaotic white blur. The heavy snowfall, driven by the wind, created opaque white curtains that obscured visibility. But Jax was patient. He regulated his breathing. In for 4 seconds, hold 4. 4 out for 4. His heart rate slowed. His pupils dilated to catch the faint light from the moon peering through the storm clouds. Beep. Sensor number 2, 20 meters from the house. They're moving. Tactically, Jax whispered, his voice hoarse. Stop. Observe. Advance. Someone was approaching this house. Not a lost hiker. A lost person would yell, stumble, make noise. This one moved like a ghost. Jax retreated, checking the magazine one last time. 15 rounds. 1 in the chamber. A total of 16 chances to terminate whatever walked through that door. He flipped the safety off, his index finger resting lightly on the trigger, his back against the wall next to the main door, waiting. The wind howled for a long moment, then subsided momentarily. It was in that brief quiet instant that Jack saw them. 2 large, dark shapes burst out of the white snow curtain. They weren't walking on 2 legs. They rushed low to the ground, fast, powerful, and synchronized like 2 black arrows shot from the same bow. Jack squinted, his muzzle dropping slightly. Wolves? No, too large for wolves. Bears? Not agile enough. The 2 black shadows lunged onto the wooden porch. The exterior oak floor groaned under their weight. Jax held his breath, listening for the sound of claws scraping the wood. But there was no bark, no frantic growling of predatory beasts. Only heavy, ragged panting. Through the crack in the window, a flash of lightning from the storm illuminated the unwelcome guests. Jax froze. They were two colossal German shepherds. Their black and tan coats were soaked, matted with snow and mud. But what made Jax's finger halt, what made his blood feel like it was turning to ice, was not the dog's presence. It was the thing between them. Clamped tightly between the two scarred, massive bodies was a small creature. A boy. The boy looked about 6 years old. No coat, no scarf, just a thin, ash-gray hoodie stained with dark patches. That looked like dried blood. He seemed utterly exhausted, his small legs dragging in the snow, his head slumped. The two dogs were executing a movement technique that Jax had never seen in standard training manuals, yet was agonizingly familiar. The one on the left nudged the boy hard with its shoulder to keep him upright. The one on the right pressed close to his side, using its hot body heat to warm the child. They formed a living cocoon, a moving shield, sandwiching their protected target and pushing the boy toward Jax's door with frantic determination. They reached the door. Jax remained still, gun still aimed. This could be a trap, the skeptical, rational part of his brain screamed. A sophisticated trap, using a child and dogs to lure you out. But then, a sound echoed, shattering all doubt, tearing apart the cold shell Jax had meticulously built over the past 3 years. The larger dog, the one with a patch of white fur on its chest, reared up. It didn't claw. Wildly, it used its two front paws, striking the thick wooden door. Thump, thump, thump. 3 hard knocks. Talp, talp. 2 light taps, using claws. Thump. 1 final hard knock. The space around Jax seemed to shatter. His ears roared. His breath caught in his throat. The Sig Sauer in his hand trembled violently before he managed to grip it tight. It wasn't random. Scratching. It was a code. 10 years ago, when Jax was a soldier, whenever he returned home after a secret midnight mission, he never rang the doorbell to avoid startling Sarah. He knocked on the door with that rhythm. 3 knocks for I, 2 for love, 1 for you. I love you. It was their private signal. Only he and Sarah knew. And her dogs. The dogs that always waited by the door. For him, whenever they heard that knock. It can't be. Jax stammered, his voice breaking. He lunged forward, yanking back the steel deadbolt. He seized the cold doorknob, twisted hard, and threw the door wide open. Roar. The furious storm wind rushed into the house like a released monster, carrying cold snow that slapped Jax's face. Right on the threshold, the 2 German shepherds stood tall like 2 guardian statues. When the door opened, they didn't hesitate for a split second. They simultaneously shoved with their shoulders. The boy in the middle, like a cut puppet string, tumbled into the house, sprawling onto the doormat. The 2 dogs didn't follow immediately. They stopped right at the threshold, snapping their heads back toward the pitch-black night at the forest edge, baring their fangs, their hackles raised like iron spikes. A low, rumbling growl, vibrating from their chests, warned menacingly. They were guarding. They were protecting the child's rear. Jax threw the gun onto the sofa, dropping to the floor where the boy lay. The child was icy cold. His lips were blue. His breathing was weak and intermittent like a lamp in the wind. Hey, kid. Little one. Jax gently patted the boy's cheek, his hand feeling skin as cold as stone. He ripped off the soaking wet hoodie. Underneath, the boy's thin body was crisscrossed with scratches from forest thorns, and a huge, terrible bruise marred his flank. The boy groaned softly, his half-closed eyes fluttering open. Emerald green eyes, clear but filled with extreme panic. His small, frozen hand groped in the air, then clamped onto Jax's wrist with desperate strength. Save, the boy whispered, his voice shattering into small fragments. They're coming. Don't let them take Baron. Oh. Then the boy went limp, his head lolling to the side, unconscious. Baron? The name struck Jax's mind like lightning. He spun around to look at the door. The larger dog, the one who had knocked, stood defiantly against the storm. It turned its head to look at Jax. Under the faint yellow light cast by the fireplace, Jax clearly saw its face. A long scar ran from its left eye down to its muzzle, the mark from when it lunged to save Sarah from a rabid pit bull 5 years ago. Its left ear was missing a small V-shaped piece. Jax tremblingly stepped forward. The snow and wind lashed his face painfully, but he felt nothing. He knelt right on the threshold, holding out a shaking hand. The dog did not retreat. It looked directly into Jax's eyes, the gaze not of an animal, but of an old soldier who had completed his mission and was reunited with his commander. It gently lowered its head, nudged its cold, wet nose into Jax's palm, then licked it lightly, a gesture painfully familiar. Jax touched its neck. The coat was thick, coarse, and soaking wet. His fingers hooked onto the worn leather collar, dark with sweat and grease. He turned the metal pendant into the light. The name tag was scratched and faded everywhere, but the deeply engraved words were still legible, though time-worn. "Welcome home, Jax love, Sarah." Hot tears streamed from Jax's eyes, rolling down his rough cheeks, mixing with the icy snowmelt. Baron and Duke. They had returned from the dead. They had crossed hell, traversed the storm, carrying a strange child to knock on his door with his wife's code of love. But the moment of emotion was instantly strangled. Baron suddenly snapped his head outward, his entire body rigid. Duke, the younger dog, standing beside him, began barking rapidly. The bark was not one of welcome. It was an attack alarm. In the distance, at the forest edge, where the snow was thickest, faint flashlight beams began to appear, cutting across the darkness. The roar of snowmobile engines echoed, drowning out the wind. Jax looked out. He saw figures, heavily armed, moving toward the house. The boy was right. They were coming. Jax leaped to his feet. The weakness, the drunkenness, the grief vanished in an instant. In its place was the deadly coldness of a former SEAL commander. "Get inside, Baron Duke. Now," Jax roared, his voice echoing like thunder. The two dogs instantly obeyed, retreating into the house but maintaining their battle stance, fangs bared toward the door. There was no time for emotion, no time to ask why or how. When tactical flashlights began sweeping across the windows like light blades slicing through the night, the SEAL instinct dormant in Jax for 3 years was brutally awakened. It rose powerfully, swallowing the grief and alcohol, transforming him back into Reaper, Jax's old call sign at Team 6. Baron, the old dog with the long facial scar, didn't wait for a command. It barked a sharp, short metallic sound. Its amber eyes stared at the dark side of the broken window, where a sniper was locating his target. At the same moment, Duke, the younger, more aggressive dog, clamped his jaws on Jax's jeans cuff, yanking him toward the oak-paneled wall next to the fireplace. Bang! The explosion tore through the silence. A large-caliber armor-piercing round ripped through the pine wood of the main door, whistled shrilly, and embedded itself in the decorative fireplace stone, inches from Jax's head. Stone dust and with splinters sprayed everywhere. If Duke hadn't pulled Jax off course by a fraction of a second, his skull would have been blown away. "Positions!" Jax yelled. It wasn't the scream of a panicked man. It was the command of a field commander. And his soldiers, Baron and Duke, had been waiting for this command for 5 years. Like a machine pre-programmed in a former life, Baron darted toward the side door, where the doggy door was sealed shut. It rammed its head, breaking the latch, and plunged into the blizzard like a phantom to carry out its mission: distract and hunt. Meanwhile, Duke did not rush out. His mission was shield. The dog spun around, standing guard directly in front of the unconscious boy on the floor. He lowered his center of gravity, bared his fangs, turning his large 40 kilograms body into a living wall, ready to tear apart anything that passed Jax to reach the child. Jax slid across the floor, gliding quickly to the secret gun, safe disguised behind a landscape painting. He entered the mechanical code. Click! The panel snapped open. Inside was his old lover, the Daniel Defense 18 Malawian Quatches assault rifle, equipped with an EO Tech sight and surefire flashlight. Jax snatched it, his left hand grabbing 2 extra magazines and stuffing them into his waistband. The motion of loading and chambering a round took less than a second. The smooth slide of the bolt sounded like music. Jax rolled to a firing position next to the shattered window frame. He took a breath, forcing his heart rate down to 60. Through the gap, Jax assessed the situation. The attackers were not petty thieves or border addicts. They moved in a pincer movement formation, 2 approaching from the left, 2 from the right, and a sniper, providing long-range cover. They wore snow camouflage, night vision goggles, and VGs, and moved silently. Professionnels, Jacques Mutarat. Mercenaries, at least, or worse, private spec ops. Why? Why would a military-grade force hunt down a 6-year-old child and 2 dogs? The question flashed through Jax's mind, but was immediately dismissed. Now is the time to kill or be killed. Let the party begin, Jax growled. He popped up, placing the EO Tech Red dot on the chest of the leading soldier on the left flank. Bang bang. 2 precise double-tap shots. The soldier fell. Backward, the snow stained red. His companion panicked, immediately opening fire with an automatic weapon toward the window. Bullets chewed up the wooden frame, and glass shards flew onto Jax. He ducked, moving to a second firing position at the kitchen window. Outside, chaos erupted. Report. Target is heavily armed. He is. The shout over the enemy's radio was cut short by a blood-curdling, agonizing scream. Growl. Out of the white snow, Baron emerged like a nightmare. It did not attack frontally. It had circled behind the sniper hiding behind a rock. Baron lunged, its sharp teeth sinking into the sniper's trigger-holding wrist, crushing bone and tendon. The sniper screamed, his rifle flying away. Baron did not stop. It yanked hard, dragging the man onto the snow, then vanished back into the darkness before his comrades could turn their weapons. Enemy morale began to waver. They were facing a former SEAL in his fortress and an invisible monster in the blizzard. Jax capitalized on the opportunity, taking down the 3rd man attempting to throw a smoke grenade. He collapsed before he could pull the pin. But Jax made a mistake. He focused too much on the front. Crash. The back door, leading to the woodpile area, was kicked inward. The thick wooden door was shattered by the kick of a nearly 2-meter-tall giant, wearing heavy, bulletproof armor. Cold wind blasted into the kitchen. Jax was in the living room, the 18 Malawian Quatches pointed at the front window. He spun around, but the long barrel snagged on the cupboard edge. Too slow. The giant raised a shotgun. The dark muzzle aimed directly at Jax's chest. The distance was less than 5 meters. At this range, Jax would be torn in half. Time seemed to freeze. Jax saw the man's finger contract on the trigger. He knew he was too late, but a black shadow lunged forward. Duke! No! Jax yelled. Duke didn't obey the command. Or rather, his command was protect at all costs. From his position next to the child, Duke launched himself into the air like a furry cruise missile. He didn't aim for the neck or legs. He aimed straight for the gun. Duke's teeth bit down onto the shotgun's foregrip and the giant's left wrist. The impact force was strong enough to deflect the barrel by a 45-degree angle. BLAM. The deafening shot roared in the confined space. The buckshot spray tore through the air, skipping past Jax's chest, but several lead pellets still embedded themselves in his left shoulder, tearing the skin. Blood spurted hot. Duke was thrown back by the recoil, yelping in pain as he hit the wall, but he immediately scrambled back up, mouth full of blood but still growling, ready to lunge again. But Jax had the time he needed. The pain in his shoulder was like fuel to the fire. Jax dropped the rifle, drawing the P226 from his waistband. He lunged, not firing, but using the steel butt of the pistol to smash the giant's temple. 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. The sound of shattering bone was brittle. The giant collapsed to the floor like a demolished tower. The room fell silent. Only the wind whistling through the broken window frames, Jax's heavy panting, and Duke's low whimper remained. Jax wiped the sweat mixed with blood from his forehead. He stepped over to check on Duke. The brave dog had a broken canine tooth, blood dripping from his mouth, but he licked Jax's hand, his tail gently wagging to signal he was okay. "Good boy. That's a good boy," Jax whispered, lightly patting his head, then turning to the giant's corpse. He rolled the mercenary over. The man was heavily equipped, ceramic armor, encrypted satellite, communication gear. Jax ripped open the Velcro patch on his combat shirt's chest. Beneath the camouflage was a silver embroidered logo, a double helix DNA strand wrapped around an hourglass. Ionio's genetics. Jax's pupils constricted. This name, it was in the scribbled notebook Sarah had hidden under the floorboards before she was hospitalized. She once said it was a devil, pharmaceutical corporation, where she suspected they were conducting illegal experiments on animals and homeless children. She had tried to gather evidence, but the cancer had struck too quickly. Too quickly? Or too perfectly timed. A chill ran down Jax's spine, colder than the storm outside. "Dad! Dad, Jax!" A weak voice sounded from behind. Jax spun around. The boy was awake. The child was trying to sit up, his trembling hand searching for something in the pocket of his tattered pants. Jax stepped over, kneeling down, the gun still in his hand, but lowered. The boy, with a bruised face and cracked lips, held out two objects. A small SD card, stained with dried blood, and a crumpled, carefully laminated photograph. Jax took the photo. The flashlight beam illuminated every detail. In the picture was Sarah. She was wearing a white lab coat, smiling, the radiant smile Jax had forgotten. She was squatting in a cold metal room, her arms tightly hugging a toddling boy. Beside her were Baron and Duke as puppies. The boy in the photo had a faint star-shaped birthmark on his neck. Jax looked up at the neck of the boy in front of him. The birthmark was still there. "Who are you?" Jax asked, his voice lost. The boy looked directly into Jax's eyes. Those blue-green eyes. Jax was startled. They didn't resemble Sarah's, but the way the boy looked at him, the mix of steadfastness and trust, was a carbon copy of his wife. "Mom," Sarah said. The boy choked up, tears streaming down his smudged cheeks. "Mom said if she didn't make it, my brothers Baron and Duke would know the way to bring me home, to Dad, Jax." Jax was numb. "Mom, Sarah, Mom wasn't sick, Dad." The boy burst into tears, the crying ripping through the former. Soldier's heart. They gave her a shot. She knew they were going to kill her to cover their tracks. She swapped the medical records. She used her last days to sabotage the security system, releasing Baron and Duke to protect me. She said you were the only person in the world strong enough to beat those bad guys. The boy tightly clasped Jax's hand, placing the SD card into his callous palm. "Everything is in here. Mom said you would know what to do." Jax's world flipped upside down. Sarah didn't die of cancer. She was murdered. She was slowly poisoned to conceal a terrible crime, a human experimentation project of which this child was a living witness. And in her most painful hours, she didn't think of herself. She executed a bold escape plan spanning 5 years, betting everything on her only remaining faith, Jax. Rage erupted in Jax's chest, burning like lava. But this time, it was not the hopeless anger of a drunk man. It was the cold, devastating fury of a husband whose wife was stolen, a father whose family was ripped away. Jax clenched the memory card. He stood up, his shadow long, enveloping the boy and the 2 injured dogs. He reloaded the 18 Malawian kwatches. The crisp click echoed, like a death sentence for Ionio's genetics. "All right, son," Jax said, his voice deep and dangerous like the ocean's roar before a tsunami. "Tell Baron to call his brother back. Tonight we hunt." Outside, dark shadows had surrounded the house, the roar of snowmobile engines like a pack of hungry beasts. He lunged toward the dusty old military laptop in the corner, plugging in the SD card. His fingers flew across the keyboard, typing the emergency activation code, Broken Arrow, the military's highest distress signal, sent directly to the private communication channel of his former team, 6 comrades. Data upload in progress. 3 minutes, Jax muttered. 3 minutes. A brief moment in everyday life, but an eternity in combat. "Leo, basement. Now," Jax yelled, pointing toward the trapdoor hidden under the rug. Barron understood, nudging the boy forcefully down the wooden stairs with his nose, then turning back to stand beside Jax. Duke, despite blood dripping from his broken tooth, limped to his feet, refusing to leave his position. Clang! A stun grenade rolled in through the broken window. Down! Jack screamed, covering his eyes. Boom! A blinding white flash and a deafening explosion shook the wooden house. But Jax was accustomed to fighting disoriented. He rolled to the side, the 18 Malawian Quatches spitting fire toward the shadows, rushing the main door. The gunfight was point-blank, brutal, and suffocating. Jax dropped the first man. Barron lunged like a black lightning bolt, tearing at the throat of the second man, attempting to throw a Molotov cocktail. The old dog fought with the savagery accumulated over 5 years of captivity, each bite a lethal blow. But the enemy was too numerous. Bullets pierced the wooden walls, turning the house into a sieve. Jax took another hit to the thigh, collapsing his back against the kitchen cabinet, his magazine nearly empty. Burn the house. Torch them. The commander's voice screamed from outside. The smell of gasoline hit his nose. Fire erupted at the front door, licking its way inward. The heat began to scorch his skin. Jax looked at Duke and Barron. Both dogs were panting, their fur matted with blood, but their eyes still blazed with fighting spirit, completely unafraid. They were ready to die here, with him, to protect the child in the basement. "I'm sorry, boys," Jax whispered, pulling out his tactical knife. "We won't go down easy." Just as the flames were about to engulf the living room, another sound echoed, drowning out the storm and the gunfire. Whoop, 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 whoop. The distinctive rotor beat of a Black Hawk helicopter. Not one, two. From the sky, high-powered searchlights shone down, turning night into day. The roar of the helicopter miniguns thundered, tearing apart the mercenary formation outside. Alpha Team, insertion, secure target. The familiar voice of Lieutenant Colonel Vance, Jax's former teammate, blared over the loudspeaker. Ropes dropped down. SEAL Special Forces soldiers in white camouflage slid onto the snow, swiftly clearing the remaining Ionio's mercenaries. Jax let go of his gun, the pain and exhaustion finally caught up, engulfing him in darkness. The next morning, the storm had passed. Weak sunlight filtered through the snapped pine branches, illuminating the wreckage of the previous night. The wooden house was partially scorched, riddled with bullet holes, but still standing, just like its owner. Federal police and military medical teams had taken over the scene. Black armored vehicles filled the yard. The data from the memory card had been decrypted, exposing one of the largest medical and human rights scandals of the decade. The Ionio's genetics empire was collapsing hourly on the news. Jack sat on the porch, on the smoke-scented wooden steps. His arms and thigh were carefully bandaged. Beside him, Leo huddled, timidly petting Barron's head. The old dog, covered in white, bandages covering fresh wounds over old scars, lay with his eyes half closed in contentment, his tail gently thumping the wooden floor in a peaceful rhythm. Duke, though limping, was running circles in the yard, chasing melting water droplets from the eaves, occasionally barking happily at the soldiers cleaning up. The air was silent. Only the sound of birds chirping signaling the storm was over. "Uncle, are you Dad Jax?" Leo whispered, his blue-green eyes looking up at him with anticipation. Jax turned to look at the boy, the thin child with the star-shaped birthmark on his neck. Then he looked at the two dogs, the living legacy Sarah had left behind. In that moment, an epiphany struck Jax, stronger than any bullet. He realized Sarah hadn't just saved this child. She had saved him. She knew better than anyone that if she left, Jax would slowly die in loneliness and self-reproach. Therefore, she left him one last mission, a reason he was forced to keep living. A son who needed protection and two of the most loyal comrades to lead him home. She had prepared the most special rescue team to pull him out of the abyss. Jax reached out his uninjured arm, wrapping it around Leo's shoulder, pulling the boy into his embrace. He felt the warmth of life, the child's strong heartbeat seeping into his own frozen heart that had been dormant for 3 years. As if sensing the connection, Baron and Duke immediately sprang up. Baron nudged his head into Jax's chest, while Duke lay down on Leo's legs. The four bodies leaned against each other, forming an unbreakable circle of protection, a fortress of love amidst the devastation. "Yes," Jax whispered, his voice hoarse from gunpowder smoke and emotion, but more certain than ever. "I'm Dux, and from now on, we're a team." The sun rose over the Oregon cliffs, brilliant and warm, illuminating 4 long shadows cast on the melting white snow. The former soldier Reaper had died in a fire last night. Now, sitting on the porch was a man with a new, glorious, lifelong mission: to be a father and to be the pack leader of this little wolf pack.